Taking you out to San Jose, California, we are chatting with Jordan Thibodeau. He's the co-host of the SVIC podcast. It's two tech industry veterans from Google, breaking down the latest in technology. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
So, I mean, obviously, we're talking about technology. As you and I are recording, CES is happening or is just wrapping up. So definitely want to talk about that and some of the trends that you're seeing in technology overall, but also specifically any tech in the podcasting space that has you interested, you know, given the name of the show. But tell us, how did you first decide to get into podcasting and launch the show?
That's a good point. Best part of the show is tech and comedy, so I haven't watched very much of CES, so failing to do my job. I think one aspect of what's going on in tech is there's just so much coming at people that's hard to figure out, like, what is actually the signal from the noise. And me and my co-host, we used to work at Google together, and when you're inside working in a corporation, you see how the sausage making process works, but then externally you get to hear people commenting on things, and a lot of the commentary is not that good. But you have a very you're getting paid very well at your tech job, but you take a vow of silence because you don't want to be one of those dastardly leakers. Those people are not good. So you can't say anything. So eventually, as time went on, me and my co-host, we moved around with different jobs. And then ChatGPT happened, which was like a magical moment. And it was the first time it felt like since the launching of the internet, maybe CRISPR, where real novel technology was coming out. It made us wonder, like, what were we doing for the last 10 years? Like releasing chat apps and releasing other social media apps that were crap, like Google Plus. Oh God! So I know I'm going to take that one to the grave.
I'm going to talk to you about Google and podcasting.
Oh boy! Okay, so I remember when I was at Google for an acquisition. I was helping Google's chat team do an acquisition, and while I was working the deal, they launched 4 chat apps on the same day. It was like Allo, Duo, and some other crap, and people at my house were asking me, like, so can you explain the differences? I'm like, knowing less, I have no idea what we're doing right now. So it was interesting times. So me and my buddy, my co-host Joe, we had a barbecue every 2 weeks, and we eat ribs together. We go way back. Dead giveaway. Sorry, I'm trying to play. You know the guy who the black dude when they found the missing white girl. And the guy found her. Oh God, I have this song. Hold on, give me 1 second. Dead giveaway. Charles Ramsey, the original Dead giveaway guy. Yeah. I actually have in our soundboard for Riverside. I have him saying "Dead giveaway." I use it really good. Here he is. Anyways, so one of his quotes is, "We eat ribs together and barbecue, and we listen to salsa music." So me and Joe have barbecue every 2 weeks, and after we eat, I talked to some of my homies, and they would say, hey, it'd be great to hear what you guys are talking about. And I'm like, well, I guess we should do a podcast. And back in 2016, Joe was saying we should do a podcast. I was like, no one's going to listen to this garbage. So eventually we start the podcast. And we were like a breath of fresh air, because when everyone was talking about this AI hype of like when ChatGPT came out, it's going to be sentient. It's sentient. It's going to kill us all. It's going to take all the jobs. Or people saying, it's worthless. I tried to ask her for the meaning of life and it didn't give me an answer. And we're like, hold on, there's a lot of in-between space here that we think me and Joe can fill. It's not going to destroy society and no one's going to give the nuclear launch codes. But at the same time, I know that I'm using it at work at Salesforce to take too long didn't read executive emails and synthesizing it down to okay, what should I know here? Or helping me take what I want to be curt and to the point to someone who I'm mad at work, going to it and saying, hey, can you actually make this nicer and fluffier so I don't get fired? So there is value here. So our show is focusing on just taking the hype out of tech, but also including real talk about how the sausage making process works inside tech companies. Because people from the outside just basically see everyone's so they see the comms messaging and Google hires the smartest people and we're so nice to each other and blah, blah, blah. But then when you're inside these big tech companies, it's just a free for all and no one really knows what's going on. So we started the podcast just help noobs and folks learn about what's going on in tech, but also include some comedy. We won't be like the boring, like, welcome to the next Friedman podcast. And today I'm going to talk about how I want to service Elon's crank and how I always love Elon. And I'm going to talk about how much I love Elon to Sam Altman. And it's going to be very awkward. So
take your pens and paper out and get ready to take notes.
yes.
It's funny you talk about how people perceive the tech industry and then what it's really like on the inside. I worked in media for a very long time, and you obviously hear a lot of stuff about, well, the media is doing this and the media is doing that. It's like, you think the media is that organized, you are out of your mind, right? Like, it is just, I appreciate a good conspiracy theory, but there has to be some plausibility to it, and there just isn't in that case. So
we all like ancient aliens,
Yeah. But no, it's just people, right? People make mistakes, people do things, and yeah, you could piece it together and frame it and shape it however you want to make, support your message, but it's just people. And on the whole, people are good, but there's a lot of people just suck, and a lot of them work in various industries, including ours.
That's true. It's like Occam's razor, basically. There's another wonderful member of our community who's like, his name is Maj, super smart dude. He's one of those freaks of nature who knows he's really good with a pen, but also is a computer science major, so he can do both things really well. And then he has a good heart. He's a really good person. But there's a different type of Occam's razor for politics, where it basically says, like, it's not the conspiracy of the one world behind there pulling on the strings. It's usually either bureaucracy, red tape, miscommunication that leads to some of these failures. And the same thing for some of these tech companies. You always hear stories of, Google's monitoring me or blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, actually, no one cares about your data. We actually have more to lose monitoring you, because you could do a class action lawsuit, than we would gain knowing about your grandmother's secret snickerdoodle recipe. To be fair, those snickerdoodles are pretty damn awesome. But
they might be. And listen, I will go to the grave. You will never convince me otherwise that Facebook isn't listening to me, because I will talk about the most obscure crap, and then next time I open up Facebook, I've got an ad with something related to that. So
okay, so that's a Facebook tracking pixel, and that's another. Can I go side note real quick?
Please.
So, Facebook tracking pixel is on your cell phone, or you don't even have to maybe launch the app. The app could just be on your cell phone, and it's still tracking pixels, and it's still monitoring in some regard, or either the websites you're on. And so I'll just go type some random things in the internet about a mattress, and all of a sudden on my Facebook feed, it will show you the mattress. Now,
which that I understand.
Yeah.
But I didn't type anything. I just said something, and now you're in my phone.
Exactly. And then another thing too is, it's not my area of expertise, but when the FBI wants to track down terrorists or whatnot, they'll go to Facebook and be like, hey, this terrorist has a friend who's on this phone. We're trying to get to this terrorist, though. Can you help us out? And Facebook has good enough data that they can basically track, just based upon that person's IP, what other IPs are in the area, what routers they were going through, and then go back to the FBI and be like, here's the person you're looking for, plus all their homies who are connected, and here's all the cities they went through, and they didn't even open the app. So it's intense.
I'm closing down my computer right now.
No, I mean, if you think about George Orwell's 1984, I mean, it's impossible in this day and age that you're not being tracked in some form. And I'm not justifying it like, oh, this is a psyops. Actually, he actually steals on the payroll for Google and is trying to get everyone used to this stuff. But it's a fact of life in this day and age. But anyways.
Well, yeah. And the amazing thing about 1984 is we are happily handing over a lot of that information, right? We are posting about it. We're filling out forums. We're, competing in those little challenges and games and all that stuff. We're basically just telling the algorithms, here's what you need to know about me. Enjoy.
Exactly. Now I'm going to get crucified because we have a great audience, and we have a lot of privacy folks here who I love and respect, and they're going to crucify me for this. But I look at it always as a give and take of, okay, I give you some of my data, but so long as you can give me back more value for what I've given you, then I will be okay in some regards. Like, for instance, like ChatGPT, if you have an enterprise version of it, it's not trading off your data. But if you give ChatGPT more information about you, it will start collecting memories on you, so that when you give it a request, it will say like, oh, Matthew Passy, you're running your podcast and whatnot. I saw your request, but also I want to put in additional context about your unique situation so that you get a really robust answer and response. And for me, when I use ChatGPT, it's doing that more and more. I'm like, hey, this is fantastic. It's when though they are taking your information and just giving you mattress ads all day long, or they are not adding any value or getting very creepy, where you're like, okay, now you've crossed the line here, and we need to dial this thing back. So, anyways,
So I'm so glad you brought, I'm glad you kind of took us in this direction. I wasn't planning on having this conversation, but I think it'll be interesting with you. One of the shortcomings of podcasting overall is the lack of data, is the lack of information, right? We know we have downloads. We're getting a little bit better with where they're coming from, what kind of devices, but right, like it is like the number one question I always got when I was consulting with clients and now working with podcasters. Everyone wants to know, how do I know who my listeners are? And we have very little information on that. Do you think that can change, or do you think there's any appetite for that to change in the tech space?
that is a really good question. Uh, I I look at for myself is for when you first start in podcasting. I'm still starting out. This is like year one. I've been doing it full time, so I'm a complete noob. And a lot of people like ask me like, "Are you looking at your metrics? Do you look at this and that and this?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I can go on YouTube because I do. YouTube is where I post my podcast, and I also cross post it onto Spotify. And YouTube will tell me the metric of people who open up the video and then how long they stay, and that's great. And I can see spikes sometimes of like, okay, yeah, I really shouldn't have told people that we're going to change this to a mukbang podcast and start eating pizza in front of them burping. Probably not a good idea because the retention went down. But other than that, like there's random spikes in every different direction. So I could sit there forever and just like try to overanalyze this point to the point that I get into my head that when I'm having an interview with Matthew, I'm thinking of like, okay, I got to say the most interesting, perfect thing possible so I can get my retention spike going on. So there's one thing about psyching yourself out.
Let me bring the rate back up.
Exactly. So I think the second thing is, I think a lot of it is, will we ever get to that level of information? We'll get more data and metrics on people and folks. I'm sure in some regard, but I think there's an aspect of people like their anonymity of I'm listening to a show, but I also don't want to give up my whole entire profile of who I am. I probably happens to you, but I've had it happen to me on LinkedIn a lot. People will message me on the side and be like, I saw your last post. It was really, really good, but I can't like it because then my management chain is going to see it. So on the side, I'm just going to give you a thumbs up. And I'm like, thanks, pussy, but whatever. That's why I'm bugging LinkedIn of, okay, so LinkedIn needs to they need to make it so that, okay, why is blind popular? I'm going to get back to your question. I'm sorry. Blind's popular because I asked my own question, answered my own question. I'm terrible. That's why you should have podcast hosts on this show. Blind's great because of anonymity, because you can just ask a question and no one knows who your background is. And so you can ask, I need a price check on my comp. Having a tough issue with my manager, like what's going on here and things like that. But the issue with blind is you don't really know who's on the backside asking the question or answering the question. You're trusting blind. These are real people. But we know, and I have friends who worked for Reddit to write fake anonymous posts that are super juicy for engagement bait to get people to be like, oh, did you see that person said on Reddit? Am I the asshole for not allowing my mother to hold my newborn baby or something? So you don't really know. What LinkedIn would be great is, what if you could set that to as people who are on my first, second, third degree connections? I can post a question anonymously and only they can answer, and they can decide if they want to answer anonymously too. And what that allows me to know is, well, if I'm getting an anonymous response on a question, it's someone I've actually genuinely connected to on LinkedIn who I know, which is better than me going on blind because I don't know who the hell's out there. And I could be asking this question anonymously to all Googlers. So I know that I might get a response from Googlers who are in the know but can't actually tell me because they're worried about their job or whatnot. Then you get the ability of people say, well, what about you? People are going to start trolling you. If someone trolls you anonymously, you click, do not allow this person to respond anonymously to my post going forward. And so that would allow people then to have a more robust conversation on LinkedIn, and it wouldn't become just a constant corporate crap you see 24/7 of like, I love my manager, agree? Like, just stupid crap. You want to have real talk. And people might mention and say, hey, well, like, this is not important. Well, if it is not important, why do corporations every year do anonymous feedback surveys for all their employees? Because they want to hear real talk. Why do corporations also do anonymous surveys to other corporations asking about how much are you paying your employees, so then they know how to pay their employees. So imagine how powerful it'd be. People could go on LinkedIn and be like, "Hey, I just got an offer. My employer decided to give me a promo, but I'm giving you a 10% bump for people who are level 6 at this role. What's your pay bump? What's your pay right now?" So then it would empower people to do that. Or what if people want to talk about dicey subjects? I think I'm getting sexually harassed in this issue. Blah blah blah. Can I get some advice on what my options are here? Or I'm getting put in a performance improvement plan right now. Here's the situation. Like, what do you think I should do? And so anyways, sorry, I'm always running that one, but let's go back to your original question about getting more data and whatnot. I think there's going to be anonymity. People are going to be anonymous here. They like to listen. They don't like to give out all their information. So the next question is how can I learn more about my audience? I think it's important that you form a community as much as possible. Get into YouTube comments. You're going to see trolls in there, always trolls. I got a troll comment today. It was like, "Oh, this show's still on the air. You suck." And then I clicked that person's profile. He has one video, one view. And I'm like, I was going to say, if I didn't say anything, you'll be a jerk. But then same time, I got a comment, got a super chat for $15. And I was like, "Hey, that's great. Thank you. I appreciate it." But what's important is you got to get in those comments because you're going to find some really great comments on people and you're going to be able to learn more about them and build a sense of community with them by responding to their comments and being sincere about it. And what I like doing is there's an app called, two things you can do. You can use YouTube Studio and you can go through your comments and use your Android or iPhone device. iPhone if you're a tool, but that's Android. Real men, real people represent. You know what I mean? You probably have iPhone. I know. You're like, "Oh, blue dot, green dot. I'm better than you, me, Steve Jobs, me." But anyways, what you can do is you can use YouTube Studio, see the comments, and you can just use your audio feature on your phone and just do voice to text and respond to people quickly. And by doing that, you're going to learn about what they like about your videos and what they don't like about your videos. Or at the end of your videos, you can say is, "Hey, and don't make sure to comment about this podcast and what did you think? What did you like? What didn't you like, or whatnot?" So then you could hear from people of like certain aspects they really like and pops about your video, and then you can incorporate that into how you do stuff. So, for instance, we would do research reviews every now and then. And I started asking people like, "Do you like this research stuff?" And people were like, "Yes, overwhelmingly." So we'd start incorporating that into our podcast. Or people started saying we need to start incorporating more comedy. And so that's how we were getting kind of signal in the early days. But as far as now, as like you mentioned, getting to like here's a master data sheet of everyone who's listening and what's good and what you should say, I think we're quite a ways away from that. But also I don't think it's ever going to perfectly materialize in that way. So
that's
anyways.
fair. Well, and I love the fact that you talk about how important it is to have a community. So many podcasters think I'm behind the microphone, I've got the megaphone, I'm talking to my audience, whereas the best podcasters, the one who do this really, really well, most of them are listening to their audience as well. And, community is a great way to do it. I want to go back to the very beginning of the conversation. We talked about Google and podcasting, and years ago, before Spotify got into the game, it was really just dominated by Apple and a couple of independent apps. And it boggled my mind that Google wasn't trying to have better inroads into podcasting, right? First, it was on the Google Play Store, which was convoluted. Then we had Google Podcasts, which actually I thought was a pretty good product, and the information that they were giving podcasters was pretty good. Then they shut that down. Now they're moving it over to Google Music and over to YouTube. But, why didn't Google just replicate the YouTube model and strip out video and own the podcasting space between searchability, their advertising ability, their ability to deliver media and track that? I mean, they could have blown everybody out of the water so quickly if they had really taken, a real deep look into it.
Let's do a quick moment of silence for all the dead Google products. We're about 296 here. I'll hold the time. 5 seconds. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, amen. Preach. If they're passing the collection till right now at church, I'd be putting $100 in there for what you had to say. A lot of it is, there's a guy who wrote a book called From Good to Great, and actually a lot of the stuff in his book actually didn't play out well, but he said, companies don't die from a lack of opportunity. They die from indigestion, trying to eat so many things at once, and they choke to death and die. And so with Google, there's just so many different things they could be doing at the company, but internally, all the decisions come down to a few VPs or the CEO, and there's only so many things that you can chase. And then there's a feedback loop of, okay, you get an idea approved, but each time you want to iterate on a product or idea, it's connected to another product. So they need to sign up for other VPs. So it slows the iteration loop down. Whereas other companies like Spotify can just go all in on streaming and what they want to do because they're just focused on that one mission. And so there were PMs inside of Google saying what you were saying, but they didn't have the right political capital or there are other priorities going on. One of my first acquisitions at Google back in 2014 was a company called Songza. And what Songza did was,
Songza.
yeah, right. Elias Roman was a CEO, great human being. Side note, everyone who's on Twitter, the CEOs always talk about how great they are to their employees and blah, 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 blah. That only matters when there's actually money on the line, because once a term sheet comes out, term sheet means when we go to acquire a company, it's kind of similar when you go buy a house or something. You know, that very expensive $6 million shanty in San Francisco that you want that has poop everywhere and whatnot. But anyways, you try to put an offer on that thing with like the poop and everything over there. And this is called like a purchase agreement. And the same thing is called a letter of intent in M&A. When the purchase agreement / letter of intent comes over, it's from us on the M&A side, and we say how much we're going to buy your company for. Now, there are CEOs who will go on Twitter and say, I take care of my employees, they're great. And then we slide over letter of intent, and they'll say, actually, I don't want these employees getting any of the money from this. I don't want their equity vesting, F them and F this, and blah, blah, blah. Elias Roman was the type of CEO who actually backed his employees and actually cared about them. And he built a really good company called Songza. Now, Songza, what they did was they focused on hiring all of these temporary employees who were masters in certain music genres to curate playlists manually of different types of hip hop and rock and things like that. And so we acquired them, and then we integrated that into Google Play Music. And Google Play Music was doing pretty decently for a while, but then Susan Wojcicki, rest in peace, great person. She was the one who decided that Google should buy YouTube. They launched YouTube Music, and so people at the company are like, "Wait a minute, we have Google Play Music, then we have YouTube Music. Like, what's going on here?" So the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand, but it kind of underscores your other point of just there's so much opportunity. There's all these different people inside the company trying to run their own product roadmaps and get power and control enough to get their message going. So eventually, after years of work, it all consolidated into YouTube Music. But then we had this podcast thing called the Google podcasting that came about, and eventually that got deprecated. And I think the reason why that got deprecated is because YouTube Music is like, no, we're going to be the future of how this thing works, and having these two separate teams doesn't make sense. So going back to like why Google wasn't able to do it, I would say one is just the company is becoming too big. Two, there's just too much opportunity to get too much opportunity out there. And then three, internal bureaucracy prevents them from getting these just nailing these easy opportunities. And then four, what makes things tough is there's also the revenue model. You're probably wondering right now, do you use Perplexity at all for AI search? Okay. Yeah. Or do you use ChatGPT search?
Yeah.
Okay. It's pretty, I don't know what are your thoughts on ChatGPT search compared to Google search?
Oh, sorry, search. No, I don't use it for search. I use it for just, random tasks, help me with this, clean up this, do that. For search, I still just Google everything. And I honestly usually ignore the first AI response.
I got homework for you. I want you to either use ChatGPT search. When you open ChatGPT, you'll see a little world icon in the chat box. Click that, and it basically is an AI-powered search. So instead of it getting 10 blue links, it will summarize the links and give you an answer. And we'll do research for you. I use it for researching things and whatnot. Google could integrate something like that, which is 1,000x better than basic Google search. But if they do that, they're going to cannibalize their existing revenue, and that's going to hurt a business model. So that's another reason that what gets in the way of Google iterating and then launching new products is they have those four concerns that I mentioned. So it's a long-winded answer. I hope it made any sense. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Like and subscribe to the show. It's great.
Well, I doubt anybody who was tuning into this episode thought they would get quite this kind of an education on technology and how, large tech companies like Facebook and Google work. But it is fascinating. As a reminder to everybody, we are chatting with Jordan Thibodeau, co-host of the SVIC podcast. Of course, you want to check it out. We'll have a link to it in the show notes, but you can find it very easily on YouTube if you Google that. Before we let you go, we ask everybody the same questions, and I'll be very curious about your answers because of the conversation that we've had so far. So the first thing I want to know is, you've only been doing this for a year. I imagine you've been listening to podcasts for a little bit more. Is there anything about podcasting you would like to see improved in the short term, in the long term, whatever it is? It could be producing content, distributing content, consuming content, but is there something like you're like, God, I wish podcasting did blank?
Ooh, great, uh, great question. When I was at Google, I used to work for Google's YouTube channel, and I worked for the Talks program. And so all I would have to do is just get great speakers, prepare questions, use the community to help me get questions, and then ask. And then there was a whole editing team, recording team that handled all the other work. And it was like the greatest thing ever because I could focus on what I was good at, is finding the right people, getting them on, channeling the community's questions, and shutting up during the interview and just letting the person cook. And so I was able to get Sebastian Younger on there, Tim Ferriss on there, Ray Dalio, Annie Duke, Susan Wojcicki, Ann Wojcicki from 23andMe, just a lot of great people on the show. And then when I started this podcast, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I'm bootstrapping this, and I guess I'm now the editing team, but I got to do all that crap work on the back end. And there's just so much just editing crap and box checking that you have to do in the back end just to get the content out. And I feel like it's a big miss from YouTube and Spotify and some of these editing software packages for them not making it easier to get podcast content out there. And right now people say the solve is either go hire someone. And it's like, well, with your check, I don't got that money right now. I gotta, other solution is like, oh, you just spend more time editing. But here's the thing. I've seen a lot of, I've seen a lot of sketch podcasts. I don't do any. I'm in a sketch podcast. I'm in the meth lab right now. And I've had videos where I haven't made a good YouTube thumbnail. The background was turned to like a Chernobyl disaster site. And I end up getting like 30,000 views and 300 subs. And I didn't do crap. And so I think I wish just the editing process, all the operational back-end cruft work would be improved for podcasts to make it easier so people who are podcasters can focus on just getting their stories out there. Because there's so many people who have good stories, but the technology just is not fully there yet to allow them to get those stories out and allow them to focus on what they do best, either getting stories or getting the right people on their show.
I love that answer. I mean, we definitely have, from when I started doing this, the tools have improved dramatically and greatly. And, there's a lot of AI supported tools that will, cut corners in certain places, and different editors that will kind of make it faster. Descript and Riverside is a really good editing tool as well for stuff like that. But yeah, it still requires, piecing together a couple of different tools. And even with that assistance, there's still a lot that goes into it. So I really like that answer. Is there any tech on your wish list that you're hoping for, like a microphone, a camera, a piece of software, something that either exists that you haven't bought yet, or something that you're like, God, I wish somebody would invent a blank to make my life easier? I mean, I guess your prior answer kind of answered that, but is there anything else in mind?
So I will say, if you're doing podcasting, shout out to Riverside. They have one of the best, we're not getting paid for this, but they have a really good customer service team. And it's probably the easiest place to get started for either video podcasts or audio podcasts. I try to influence their product roadmap. I make requests on the WhatsApp group. That's how we found each other. And thank you for reaching out to me for being on this. I appreciate it.
Kendall's great, by the way, at responding to all those.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Amazing. She's really good. So they're one love to that team. What I really want is, I started the podcast because we were really interested in talking about tech and AI, and I really want computer use agents to improve so that then I can have an agent that can connect different pieces of software and do all the clicking and manual work in the back end. Like, do you upload videos to YouTube for your podcast? Okay. How many times have you clicked the disclaimer of like, no, this is not pornography. No, this is not hate speech. Yes, put monetization, accept. Every time you put if I have an AI agent that could just do that for me, and I can offload that and just automate that, that's what I want. And I'm praying that this is the year, because there's a company called Cohere that had their own AI agent. Another company called, oh crap, I'm forgetting the name right now. They created their own AI agent, and I was able to get it to upload YouTube shorts from my computer into YouTube and have them run. But here's the thing. It would do it once correctly out of 20 times. So I can't, it doesn't work. And it's because the underlying agent, the foundation model, is not there yet. And they're making improvements now. And I'm hoping that this is a year where I can at least say, okay, can you do this correctly 85, 90% of the time? So I can offload some work. And there we go. So that's the thing I want. I want a computer use AI agent that can help me put together these various software tools that I'm using that requires no code and can just serve as my low level assistant editor and just go assistant productions person. And
Well,
go
if anybody listening out there can do that kind of stuff, I'm sure there's some investment dollars to help you get it done, help you get across the finish line.
Yep.
All right, last question. Is there another podcast or two that you listen to, you subscribe to, that, you know, when they drop a new episode, whatever it is you're listening to, you're going to stop, check that out, or you're never going to let one of their new episodes get past you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Yeah, that's a good question. I listened to various podcasts, but like when I was a kid, I guess I used to listen to Tim Ferriss' podcast a lot. And then as I grew older, now I find myself listening to more audiobooks. And then when I do listen to podcasts, but it's more of work focused. So I do reaction videos to either Sam Altman's on whatever podcast.
So it's a lot of guest centric listening.
Yeah, I listen to Kill Tony when it comes out when I have time. I like comedy. And then Shane Gillis has some good stuff I'll listen to. Oh my god, last weekend podcast with I forget his name. He has a mullet. He's from New Orleans. Theo Vaughn. When Theo Vaughn has a podcast, I'll listen to it. And what I like about his podcast is he stays in his lane of comedy. He won't go on there and just be like, okay, now let's go talk about like why you shouldn't do vaccines and stuff like that. He knows like where he's supposed to be. I also, for people who are new, who are listening, setting up, it's the cliche advice of just get started with any crap technology you have. If you want inspiration, go over to MKHV's YouTube and then click like sort his videos from the very beginning. And his first video is like him at like 10 years old and he's like using a flip phone, like recording, and everything's crap, but he started. And what's important is you just get something out there and then focus on what you can improve from that last video. Don't focus on, oh, my views or my subs or someone's mad at me or, you know, if someone else's podcast is beautiful. No, look at your last video and say, like, what can I improve? Extra points is get the transcript from your last video, put it into ChatGPT and say, what can I improve from this interview? And ChatGPT will give you some recommendations of what you can improve from your interview. And then do that step by step. Don't even spend money on buying equipment. If you can just use what you have, even if it's like your integrated laptop camera or whatnot, just use that. And then if you get super chats or donations, then use some of that money to buy pieces of equipment, but buy cheap stuff. This is a $50 microphone. I have a depth set camera that's like maybe $100 or so. I have a, that light that has it's a light, but it has the cone on it. Well, I don't know what the hell they're called. It's like, I should cure. Okay. I have this light box for like $45. And then I have like my dual monitors. But all of this is like kind of just put together like bit by bit in my headphones. So keep everything cheap because everyone thinks like when you start up, it's going to be success. I'm going to go. It's not that way. You have to grind stuff out. And if you're constantly outlaying cash, it's going to become, eventually you're going to get the call from the wife. Like, what the hell's going on here? I have kids to raise here. Like, what the hell?
You must be listening to my phone because I give out this exact advice all the times when I was consulting clients and doing audits and, just going on other podcasts and talking about the space, like just verbatim. So I love that advice. I love the energy, love the spirit, love what you guys are doing. Once again, it's the SVIC podcast. Co-host Jordan Thibodeau joining us today. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Matthew. And also, Matt, like and subscribe Matthew's podcast. Do it right now. Like and subscribe and comment and share with a friend. It means a lot. Thank you.
Jordan, check is in the mail.
Cool.